The engine turned over 3 times before it caught, and in that moment I knew I was screwed. Maya's hands were black with grease, her forearms streaked with oil that had dripped from the carburetor she'd been rebuilding for the past 6 weeks. She stood there in our driveway in Poughkeepsie, New York, one hand still on the hood of her mother's 1987 Mazda RX-7, listening to the engine settle into an uneven idle that sounded like a heartbeat coming back to life. It was early October, and the afternoon sun cut through the maple trees in our yard, making the car's faded red paint look almost new again. I should have felt proud. Instead, I felt the weight of my own stupidity pressing down on my chest like a cinder block. "You owe me $50,000, Dad." Maya didn't look at me when she said it. She was 17, still had 3 months until graduation, and she'd just accomplished something I genuinely believed was impossible. The RX-7 had been sitting in our garage since her mother died 4 years ago, a rotary-engine monument to everything I couldn't fix. I'd made the promise on a hot August night, drunk on cheap bourbon and the kind of reckless grief that makes men say stupid things to their daughters. "If you can get that piece of junk running by your 18th birthday," I'd said, "I'll give you 50 grand for college." I'd been so sure she'd fail. The car had been dead for 6 years, even before the accident. Sarah had loved that car more than she loved most people. Spent every weekend for 2 years restoring it, but she'd never gotten it to run right. The rotary engine was temperamental, required knowledge that seemed almost mystical, parts that were increasingly rare. I figured Maya would tinker with it for a few weeks, get frustrated, and move on to something else. Teenagers always did, but Maya wasn't most teenagers. She let go of the hood and walked around to the driver's side, her movements careful, almost reverent. She was tall, like her mother, had the same sharp cheekbones and dark hair that fell in waves when she didn't tie it back. She wore an old Metallica t-shirt that used to be Sarah's, so worn the print was barely visible. Through the garage window, I could see the collection of automotive manuals she'd checked out from the library, the YouTube videos she'd bookmarked on rotary engine repair, the notebook where she'd documented every step of the rebuild. The engine continued to idle, rough but persistent. "I mean it," Maya said, finally looking at me. Her eyes were Sarah's eyes, hazel with flecks of gold. "You promised." I stood there on our cracked driveway, surrounded by the comfortable decay of our lower-middle-class neighborhood, houses that had been beautiful in the 70s, now weathered by decades of harsh winters and deferred maintenance. The Hendersons' place next door had a tarp over part of the roof that had been there since last spring. Across the street, Mike Patterson's truck sat on blocks, had been sitting there for 2 years. This was a neighborhood where promises were things you made when you were drunk, not contracts you actually expected to fulfill. "Maya, we need to talk about this." She cut the engine. The sudden silence felt accusatory. "There's nothing to talk about." Her voice was level, controlled in a way that reminded me uncomfortably of her mother during their last fight. "You made a promise. I held up my end. The car runs." "It runs now. For how long?" "Long enough." She pulled a rag from her back pocket and started wiping the grease from her hands. "You specified 18th birthday. You specified getting it running. You didn't say anything about it running forever." I wanted to argue, to point out the absurdity of holding me to a drunken promise made in grief. But the truth was, I'd meant it when I said it. In that bourbon-soaked moment, I genuinely wanted to give her that money, wanted to be the father who could solve problems with cash, who could make up for the empty seat at her school events, for the dinner conversations that were mostly silence, for every way I'd failed since Sarah died. I just never thought I'd actually have to pay. "Come inside," I said. "Let's talk this through." Maya didn't move. She stood there, with the rag in her hands, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Disappointment, maybe, or something worse, resignation, like she'd expected this exact response. "You don't have it," she said. It wasn't a question. The October air was getting colder as the sun dropped behind the trees. Somewhere down the street, someone was burning leaves despite the municipal ban, the smoke drifting through the neighborhood like a ghost. I could hear the Rodriguez's dog barking, the distant sound of traffic on Route 9. It's complicated, I said. Maya laughed, but there was no humor in it. It's always complicated with you. She walked past me toward the house, her boots leaving prints of engine oil on the concrete. I stood there alone with the RX-7, its engine ticking as it cooled, and thought about the $247 in my checking account, the maxed-out credit cards hidden in my desk drawer, and the promotion at the electrical supply warehouse that I'd been passed over for 3 times in the last 2 years. $50,000 might as well have been 50 million. Inside, our house looked like what it was, a place where 2 people lived but didn't really share a life. The living room still had most of Sarah's decorations, but they were gathering dust. The kitchen was functional but joyless. Maya's domain was upstairs, a bedroom she'd painted black 2 years ago and filled with automotive posters and the kind of aggressive music that leaked through the floor at odd hours. My domain was the basement, where I spent most nights watching sports I didn't care about and drinking beer that I told myself didn't count as a problem. Maya was in the kitchen, washing her hands at the sink with dish soap and a scrub brush. The grease was stubborn, embedded under her fingernails, worked into the creases of her palms. "I've been saving," she said, without turning around. "Between my job at the diner and what Grandma sends for birthdays, I've got almost 8,000, but State University is 36,000 a year. Even for in-state, I was counting on your money to cover the gap." She'd never told me she was saving, never told me she'd already calculated the costs, made plans that extended beyond this house and this town. The realization hit me like cold water. "You applied to state?" "Early decision. I find out in December." She turned off the water and dried her hands on a towel that had seen better days. "Automotive engineering program. They've got one of the best in the Northeast." Of course she did. Of course she'd planned it all out while I was down in the basement, marinating in my own failure. "Maya, I want to help, I do, but $50,000 is what you promised." She turned to face me now, and I could see the tears she was fighting to keep back. "You stood in that garage, you put your hand on Mom's car, and you swore. You said, 'If you can bring this back to life, I'll give you the money for college.' Those were your exact words." I had said that. I remembered it now, the way the bourbon had made me feel expansive, generous. Sarah had been dead for 6 months. Maya had been crying herself to sleep every night. I'd wanted to give her something, some reason to get out of bed, some project that would fill the empty hours. The promise had seemed harmless, impossible, a fantasy that would at least give her something to think about. "I thought—" "You thought I'd fail." Maya's voice cracked. "You thought I was too young, too stupid, too much of a girl to figure it out, just like you thought Mom would fail when she started rebuilding it." That stung, because it was partially true. I had doubted Sarah too, had made jokes about her little project, had suggested she was wasting her time and money on a car that would never run right. She'd proved me wrong, had gotten within sight of success before the engine grenaded itself, and she'd lost interest, moved on to other things. Until the accident. Until a drunk driver ran a red light on Route 44 and turned our lives into before and after. "That's not fair," I said. "None of this is fair." Maya's voice was rising now, the control slipping. "It's not fair that Mom's dead. It's not fair that I spent my entire summer watching YouTube videos and calling rotary engine specialists and learning about apex seals and coolant routing. It's not fair that I skipped parties and dates and everything else girls my age are supposed to do because I was in that garage every single day, trying to fix something you were sure was broken forever. And it's not fair that I actually did it, and now you're going to tell me you can't pay up." We stood there in our kitchen with its linoleum floor that curled at the edges and its refrigerator that hummed too loud, and I realized I had nothing to say. She was right, about all of it. "I need that money, Dad." Maya's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I need to get out of here. I need to go somewhere where I'm not constantly reminded that she's gone, where I can be someone other than the girl whose mum died. And you promised you'd help me do that." The silence stretched between us like a physical thing. "Let me figure something out," I said finally. "Give me some time." Maya looked at me for a long moment, and I could see her making calculations, weighing trust against disappointment, hope against experience. "You've got until my birthday," well, she said, "February 14th. That's 4 months. You come up with the money, or we're done." Done? Done talking, done pretending we're a family, done. She walked past me toward the stairs. "I'll get through senior year, I'll graduate, and then I'm gone, with or without your money, with or without you." I listened to her footsteps on the stairs, the sound of her bedroom door closing with deliberate gentleness, worse than a slam because it was so controlled. Through the kitchen window, I could see the RX-7 sitting in the driveway, its lines still beautiful despite the faded paint and surface rust. Sarah's car, Sarah's dream, Sarah's daughter. I'd made a lot of promises to Sarah before she died. Promises to take care of Maya, to keep the house together, to be a better man than I'd been during our marriage. I'd broken most of them, slowly, through the accumulated weight of small failures and daily surrenders. But this promise to Maya, this might be the one I couldn't afford to break. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. The numbers hadn't changed since this morning. I did the math anyway, calculating and recalculating, trying to find some combination that would make $50,000 materialize from my meager assets. It was impossible. Even if I emptied my retirement account, took the penalty, sold everything I owned, the house still had 18 years left on the mortgage. My truck was worth maybe $8,000. My possessions were the accumulated detritus of a life that had never been particularly successful. I thought about calling my brother in Colorado, but Derek had his own problems, his own family to support. I thought about my father, but we hadn't spoken in 3 years, and anyway, he'd spent his retirement on a boat he didn't know how to sail. There was no way out. No secret reserve of cash, no generous relative, no miracle solution, just me and a promise I'd made to my daughter, sitting between us like an unexploded bomb. Outside, the sun had fully set. The neighborhood was settling into its evening routine, porch lights clicking on, the blue glow of television screens in living room windows, the smell of somebody's dinner cooking. Normal life, continuing its normal rhythm while my world quietly came apart. I went down to the basement and opened a beer. Then I opened another. By the third one, I'd started making plans that probably wouldn't work. By the fourth, I'd convinced myself they might. It was going to be a long 4 months. The call from Rick Donovan came on a Tuesday morning in late October, while I was on my lunch break at the warehouse, eating a sandwich that tasted like cardboard and regret. "Tommy, you busy Friday night?" Rick and I had gone to high school together, back when Poughkeepsie still had factories and futures. Now he ran a construction crew that did mostly renovation work, the kind of under-the-table jobs that paid cash and didn't ask too many questions about permits. "Depends," I said. "What's the job?" "Demolition work up in Rhinebeck. Rich couple bought an old farmhouse, want the interior gutted before the contractors come in. 2 nights, maybe 3. Cash money. I'm short a guy." I did the math quickly. Rick usually paid $200 a night for demo work, more if it was particularly nasty, $600, maybe $900 if it went long. It was something, not 50,000, but something. "I'm in." "Good man. Friday at 6, I'll text you the address." He paused. "How's Maya doing?" Everyone in town knew about Maya and the car. Someone had posted a video of her test driving it around the block, the rotary engine's distinctive buzz drawing attention from neighbors who'd watched her labor over it all summer. The video had gotten 3,000 views, mostly from other RX-7 enthusiasts who couldn't believe a 17-year-old girl had successfully rebuilt a rotary engine. "She's good," I lied. "Really good. She's Sarah's kid, all right. That girl could have fixed anything." Rick had dated Sarah briefly in high school before she met me. There was no jealousy there, just a wistful acknowledgement of the past. "You must be proud." "Yeah," I said, "proud." After we hung up, I sat in my truck in the warehouse parking lot and thought about the promise I'd made. 4 months had seemed like enough time when Maya first started her countdown. Now, with November approaching and winter looming, it felt impossibly short. I'd started picking up extra shifts at the warehouse, coming in early, staying late. My supervisor, Dale, had noticed and made comments that straddled the line between appreciation and exploitation. "Good to see someone with work ethic," he'd said, while assigning me the worst tasks: inventory in the unheated storage building, loading trucks in the rain, cleaning out the returns area where damaged electrical fixtures accumulated like broken dreams. I was making an extra $150 a week, maybe $200 if I pushed it. At that rate, I'd have maybe $3,000 by Maya's birthday. It wasn't even close. The Tuesday after Rick's call, I started looking for more work. I put out feelers with people I knew, posted on local Facebook groups, checked Craigslist twice a day. The responses came slowly, odd jobs mostly: cleaning gutters for $75, helping someone move furniture for $50, splitting firewood for an elderly couple in Wappingers Falls for $40, and a lunch I didn't have time to eat. I was tired all the time now, running on coffee and stubbornness. At the warehouse, I started making mistakes, shipping the wrong orders, miscounting inventory, dropping a pallet of light fixtures that cost the company $800. Dale stopped making supportive comments and started making threats. At home, Maya and I existed in parallel orbits. She'd come home from school, grab something from the kitchen, and disappear into the garage to work on the RX-7. She was making improvements now, fine-tuning the engine, replacing worn suspension components, touching up the paint. The car was becoming beautiful again, restored not just to function, but to glory. I'd watch her sometimes from the kitchen window while I ate my dinner, standing up, ready to head out to whatever evening job I'd found. She moved around the car with confidence now, her hands sure, her problem-solving methodical. She'd inherited Sarah's mechanical intuition, that inexplicable ability to diagnose problems through sound and feel and accumulated knowledge. We'd go days without really talking. When we did speak, it was transactional. "I'm working late. I need to borrow the truck. There's leftover pizza in the fridge." The warmth we'd once had, the easy companionship of her childhood, had evaporated, leaving only the hard residue of my broken promise. In early November, I went to see a financial advisor. His office was in a strip mall in Hyde Park, sandwiched between a nail salon and a chiropractor. His name was Dennis, and he wore a suit that was slightly too tight and a smile that was slightly too wide. I laid out my situation, careful not to mention the promise or its origin. Just a father trying to figure out how to pay for his daughter's college. Dennis ran the numbers with practiced efficiency, his fingers dancing across a calculator while I sat in a chair that squeaked when I shifted my weight. "With your current income and assets," he said finally, "and you could potentially qualify for a personal loan of about $15,000 at 19% interest. You'd be paying for it for the next 7 years, and the monthly payments would be significant." 15,000. I felt something collapse inside my chest. "That's it?" "Your debt-to-income ratio is problematic. The maxed credit cards don't help, and the mortgage on the house is, well, you're underwater there. You owe more than it's worth in the current market." He gave me that professional smile again. Has she applied for financial aid, student loans? There are programs. I made her a promise, I said. The words came out harder than I intended. I told her if she could fix her mother's car, I'd pay for college. She fixed the car. Dennis's smile faltered. I see. That's admirable. But from a practical standpoint, can you help me or not? He couldn't. Nobody could. Over the next few weeks, I talked to 3 other banks, 2 credit unions, and a predatory lender who offered me $20,000 at 29% interest with terms that would have essentially made me an indentured servant. I was making progress, but it was agonizingly slow. By Thanksgiving, I had $4,000 saved, a combination of my extra work, the warehouse overtime, and the odd jobs. I'd lost 12 pounds I couldn't afford to lose, and I'd developed a persistent cough from working in unheated buildings. Thanksgiving itself was a small disaster. Maya's grandmother, Sarah's mother, drove up from Jersey City with her new boyfriend, a cheerful man named Eduardo, who sold insurance and didn't understand why the atmosphere in our house felt like a funeral. We ate a meal I'd paid too much for from a grocery store, sitting around our dining room table that we normally used for storing mail. So, Maya, Eduardo said, trying to fill the silence, your grandmother tells me you rebuilt a car. That's remarkable. Maya pushed food around her plate. Thanks. She's being modest, Sarah's mother said. Her name was Patricia, and she'd never liked me, not even when Sarah was alive. She accomplished something extraordinary, didn't she, Tommy? There was an edge in her voice, a challenge. Patricia knew about the promise. Maya had told her, probably crying on the phone late at night when I was down in the basement, counting my money and my failures. She did, I said. And you must be so proud, Patricia continued, her smile sharp. So ready to support her dreams, help her move forward with her life. Maya stood up abruptly. I'm not hungry. She left the table, left the house, and I heard the RX-7 start up a minute later, its rotary engine settling into that distinctive idle. She drove away, and I sat there with Patricia's judgment and Eduardo's confusion, picking at turkey that tasted like paste. You're going to lose her, Patricia said after Eduardo excused himself to use the bathroom. Just like you lost Sarah. I didn't lose Sarah. She died. You lost her long before that. Patricia's voice was cold. You lost her when you stopped trying, stopped caring, stopped being the man she thought she married, and now you're doing the same thing to Maya. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but the truth was, she was right. Sarah and I had been drifting apart for years before the accident. Our marriage held together by habit and Maya and the accumulated weight of shared history. We'd stopped having real conversations, stopped touching, stopped seeing each other as anything other than roommates in a mutual obligation. The accident had frozen us in that moment of decline, had turned Sarah into a saint in everyone's memory, had made me the perpetual failure who couldn't live up to his dead wife's ghost. Patricia left before dessert, Eduardo trailing apologetically behind her. I sat alone in the house, surrounded by the detritus of an unsuccessful holiday, and thought about what I was willing to do to keep my promise. The answer, I realized, was almost anything. In early December, I started selling things. Not big things. The house was mostly Sarah's furniture, items with sentimental value I couldn't touch. But I had tools I never used, camping equipment from optimistic phases of my life, a guitar I'd bought in my 20s and never learned to play. I put it all on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist, watching the money trickle in, $50 here, $75 there, every bit helped. I sold my truck to a guy in Newburgh for $7,000, bought a $1,500 Beta Honda to replace it. The Honda rattled and smoked and looked like it might die at any moment, but it ran, and I pocketed $5,500 from the transaction. By mid-December, I had $12,000 saved. It felt like a victory and a defeat simultaneously. More than I'd thought I could scrape together, less than a quarter of what I needed. Maya got her acceptance letter from State University on December 18th. I came home from the warehouse to find her in the kitchen, the letter on the table, her face carefully neutral. "They accepted me," she said. "Full admission to the automotive engineering program. I start in the fall." "Maya, that's incredible." I reached for her, wanting to hug her, to share the moment. She stepped back. "Yeah, it's great." She looked at the letter, not at me. The financial aid package arrived too. They're offering me $18,000 in grants and loans. That leaves $18,000 I need to cover, plus room and board, books, all the rest. The numbers hung in the air between us. "I've been saving," I said. "I'm almost at 12,000. Almost at 12,000. She repeated it like she was testing the words. "You're almost at a quarter of what you promised, with 2 months to go." "I'm trying, Maya. I'm working every hour I can. I've sold—" "I know what you've sold. I see the Honda in the driveway. I see you leaving the house at 6 in the morning and coming home at midnight. I see you, Dad." Her voice cracked. "But seeing you try and watching you succeed are two different things." She picked up the acceptance letter and walked out of the kitchen. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, heard her door close with that same terrible gentleness. I sat down at the table and did the math again. 12,000 saved, 2 months remaining. Even if I maintained my current pace, which was already unsustainable, I'd maybe reach 20,000 by February, 30,000 short. 30,000 might as well be 30 million. The next day, I went back to the predatory lender. His office smelled like cheap air freshener and desperation. His name was Vincent, and he didn't bother with the professional smile that Dennis had deployed. 20,000 at 29%, he said, pulling up my previous application. "But I can do 30 if you put the house up as collateral." "The house is underwater." "Not my problem. You default, I take the house, sell it at auction, you cover the difference." He shrugged. "That's the deal." I thought about Maya's face when she read that acceptance letter. I thought about Sarah's ghost, watching me fail our daughter. I thought about promises and what they meant, what they cost. 30,000, I said. "When can I have it?" Vincent smiled for the first time. "End of the week." I signed papers I barely read, committed myself to payments that would consume 40% of my income for the next decade, put my house at risk for a loan that would probably destroy me financially. When I walked out of Vincent's office, I had a check for $30,000 and a sick feeling in my stomach that wouldn't go away. Combined with my savings, I had 42,000, still 8,000 short, but closer than I'd ever expected to get. I had 7 weeks to find the rest. I went home and looked at the RX-7 sitting in the driveway. Maya had waxed it recently, and it gleamed in the winter afternoon light. Sarah's car, Sarah's legacy, Sarah's absurd dream that our daughter had somehow made real. I wondered what Sarah would think of what I was doing, whether she'd be proud that I was trying or horrified at the price I was paying. Whether she'd even recognize the man I'd become in the 4 years since she'd died. The answers didn't matter. She was gone, and Maya was here, and the clock was ticking. I had $42,000 and 7 weeks. It would have to be enough. I found out about the second job Maya had been working when I ran into her manager at the Price Chopper in January. Linda Chen worked the early shift at the diner where Maya waitressed on weekends, and she'd always been kind to me in the distracted way people are to acquaintances they see in passing. We were both buying coffee, her 3 pounds of dark roast for the diner, me the cheapest generic brand I could find. "Haven't seen Maya for a few weeks," Linda said, scanning her items. "I hope everything's okay with the late shift at the gas station." I must have looked confused, because Linda's expression shifted. "The overnight shift? At the mobile station on Route 9? She was choosing her words carefully now. "She told me she needed to cut back hours at the diner because of it. I assumed you knew." I didn't know. Maya had been leaving the house at 11 at night, telling me she was studying at her friend Kayla's place. I'd been too exhausted from my own work to question it, too grateful for the quiet house to push for details. "Right," I said. "Yeah, the gas station. She's saving for college." Linda nodded, but I could see the judgment in her eyes. Another thing the father should have known but didn't. I drove straight to the mobile station, even though it was 2 in the afternoon, and Maya wouldn't be there. The manager was a guy in his 50s named Raj, who'd owned the place for 15 years. He confirmed what Linda had told me. Maya had been working the midnight to 6 a.m. shift 4 nights a week since November, covering for a guy who'd quit suddenly. "She's a good worker," Raj said. "Shows up on time, keeps the place clean, doesn't complain about the drunks and the weird customers you get at that hour. I tried to talk her out of it, told her a girl her age shouldn't be working overnight, but she said she needed the money." I felt something twist in my chest. "How much are you paying her?" $12.50 an hour, plus an overnight differential that brings it to 15. She's clearing about $400 a week after taxes. $400 a week. For 4 months, that was $6,400. Combined with her savings from the diner and her grandmother's birthday money, Maya probably had close to $15,000 set aside. She was 17 years old, working 2 jobs, getting 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night, and still maintaining a 3.7 GPA. She was doing all of that because she didn't trust me to keep my promise. That night, I waited up for her. I heard the Honda pull into the driveway at 6:15 a.m. Heard her footsteps on the porch. When she came through the door, she looked exhausted. Her eyes red-rimmed, her skin pale, her movements slow with fatigue. "Why didn't you tell me about the gas station?" I asked. She froze in the doorway, still wearing her mobile uniform shirt under her winter jacket. For a moment, she looked like she might lie, might deflect. Then something in her face hardened. "Because it's not your business. You're 17 years old, working overnight shifts." "I'm trying to fill the gap," she interrupted. "The gap between what you promised and what you're actually going to deliver. Someone has to be realistic here. I've been working too. I've been killing myself to get that money." "I know." She said it without sympathy. "I see you. But I also did the math, Dad. I know what you make at the warehouse. I know what side jobs pay. I know you sold the truck and took out a loan. Yes, I found the paperwork. You're not as subtle as you think. And I know that even with all of that, you're not going to have $50,000 by February 14th. She was right, of course. With my 42,000 and whatever I could scrape together in the next month, I might get to 45,000, maybe 47, if I sold my remaining possessions and worked every waking hour. "So I'm covering the difference," Maya continued. "I'm taking care of myself, because that's what I've been doing since Mom died, and it's clearly what I'm going to keep doing after I leave." "That's not fair." "No?" She laughed, harsh and bitter. "You want to talk about fair? Fair would be having a father who didn't make promises he couldn't keep. Fair would be having a father who noticed when his daughter stopped sleeping, stopped eating, stopped being a kid because she was too busy trying to survive. Fair would be—" She stopped, her breath catching, and I saw tears in her eyes that she angrily wiped away. "Fair would be having a mother who didn't die," she finished quietly. "But we don't get fair. We get this." She walked past me toward the stairs. "Maya, I'm going to sleep for 3 hours. Then I have to get to school. We can fight about this later if you want, but it won't change anything. I'm keeping both jobs until I have enough money to feel safe, because depending on you doesn't feel safe anymore." I listened to her footsteps fade, heard her bedroom door close, and felt the full weight of my failure settle onto my shoulders. She was right about all of it. The next 2 weeks were a blur of work and worry. I picked up every overtime shift Dale would give me, took every odd job I could find. I was painting a house in Fishkill when I missed Maya's mid-year academic awards ceremony. I was doing demo work in Kingston when I should have been at her senior night for the robotics club she'd joined sophomore year. I was present in the house, but absent from her life, and the distance between us grew into a chasm. In late January, I got a call from Maya's school counselor, Mrs. Rodriguez. She wanted to meet about Maya's concerning behavior. I took time off work I couldn't afford and sat in her office with its motivational posters and dying plants, waiting for the lecture about Maya's overnight job. But that wasn't what Mrs. Rodriguez wanted to talk about. "Maya fell asleep in class 3 times last week," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Her teachers are worried. I'm worried. She's clearly exhausted. And when I asked her about it, she became defensive and shut down. I was hoping you could shed some light on what's going on at home." What could I say? That I'd made a stupid promise and my daughter was destroying herself trying to compensate for my failure? That we were locked in a mutual death spiral of overwork and silence? "She's working a lot," I said, "saving for college." "I understand that. But she's also still a minor, still in high school, still developing. Working overnight shifts while trying to maintain her academic performance is unsustainable." Mrs. Rodriguez leaned forward. "Mr. Morrison, I've been doing this job for 20 years. I've seen a lot of students push themselves too hard. Maya's heading for a breakdown. I'll talk to her." Have you talked to her? Really talked to her?" Mrs. Rodriguez's expression was kind, but skeptical. "Because from what I can see, you're both working yourselves into the ground, and neither of you is actually dealing with the underlying issues." I wanted to be offended, but she was right. When was the last time Maya and I had a real conversation? When was the last time we'd shared a meal? Watched a movie, existed in the same space as something other than exhausted ghosts? "What do I do?" I asked. "Be her father," Mrs. Rodriguez said. "Not her employer, not her debtor. Her father. She needs that more than she needs college money." I left the school feeling worse than when I'd arrived. That night, I came home early, 6 o'clock instead of midnight, and found Maya in the garage. Working on the RX-7, the car looked perfect now, fully restored, better than it had probably ever been. She was just polishing it, maintaining it, keeping her hands busy. "We need to talk," I said. She didn't look up. "About what?" "About you quitting the overnight job." Now she looked up, her expression hardening. "No." "Maya, your school counselor called. You're falling asleep in class. You're burning yourself out. So are you. I'm an adult, it's different." "Is it?" She set down her polishing cloth. "You look like hell, Dad. You've lost weight. You're coughing all the time. You look like you're about a week away from a heart attack. But you keep pushing because you made a promise you couldn't keep. Well, guess what? I made a promise too. To myself. That I was going to get out of this town, go to college, make something of my life. And I'm keeping that promise, with or without your help. I don't want you to have to do this alone." "Then you should have thought about that before you made a promise you couldn't keep." She picked up the cloth again, turned back to the car. "We've got 3 weeks until my birthday. You show up with the money or you don't. Either way, I'll be fine. I'll figure it out. I always do." The dismissal was clear. I left her in the garage and went inside, where I sat at the kitchen table and stared at my bank statements. $44,000 saved, 6,000 short with 3 weeks to go. I started looking at things I'd sworn I wouldn't sell. Sarah's jewelry, not much, but worth maybe 2,000. My father's old watch, which might bring 500 from a collector. The wedding ring I still wore, which I couldn't bring myself to price. I was contemplating pawning Sarah's engagement ring when my phone rang. It was my brother Derek calling from Colorado. We hadn't spoken in months. "Tommy, I need to talk to you about something." His voice had that careful tone people use when they're about to deliver bad news. I braced myself. "Dad had a stroke," Derek said. "He's okay. Well, he's stable. But he's going to need care, and his insurance doesn't cover everything. I know you and him aren't close, but I'm trying to figure out how to handle this, and I wanted to give you a heads up that there might be some financial—" "How much?" I interrupted. "What? How much are you going to need?" Derek was quiet for a moment. "I don't know yet. Maybe a few thousand. I'm still working through the medical bills. But Tommy, I'm not asking you for money. I know you've got your own situation. I'm just keeping you informed." "A few thousand. On top of everything else, my father, who I hadn't forgiven for walking out when I was 15, was going to need money I didn't have for care I didn't want to provide." "Keep me posted," I said, and hung up before Derek could ask any questions. I sat there in the kitchen, surrounded by bills and bank statements and the accumulated evidence of my inadequacy, and felt something inside me finally crack. The exhaustion, the pressure, the constant grinding anxiety of trying to make impossible math work, it all crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. I couldn't do this. I couldn't keep pushing, couldn't keep pretending that working harder would somehow create money that didn't exist. I was drowning, and all my struggling was just making me sink faster. I pulled out my phone and started typing an email to Maya. I was going to tell her the truth, that I'd tried, that I'd failed, that I was sorry, that I had $44,000 and it would have to be enough. But I couldn't finish it. Every time I tried to explain, the words felt like surrender. Like I was giving up on the last promise I had left, the last connection to my daughter, the last thread holding our family together. I deleted the draft and opened my banking app instead. $44,000 in savings, $30,000 in debt at 29% interest, a house worth less than I owed, a job that paid $42,000 a year, a daughter who trusted me less with every passing day. The numbers didn't lie. I was $6,000 short, and I had 3 weeks to find it. Outside, I heard the RX-7 start up. Maya was going for a drive, something she did now when the walls of the house felt too close. The rotary engine buzzed down the street, fading into the January night, and I sat alone in the kitchen, trying to figure out how to be the father she deserved instead of the failure I'd become. The answer didn't come. It never did. Maya's 18th birthday fell on a Thursday, which meant she had to work both jobs, the diner during the day, the gas station overnight. I'd taken the day off from the warehouse, burned one of my last remaining vacation days, and spent the morning sitting at the kitchen table with an envelope containing $46,300 in certified checks, $4,000 short. After everything, the extra shifts, the odd jobs, the predatory loan, selling nearly everything I owned of value, I was still $4,000 short. I'd tried everything in those final 3 weeks. I'd called in every favor, reached out to distant relatives, even considered selling the RX-7 itself before realizing that would destroy the entire point of what we'd been doing. The car was Maya's accomplishment, her connection to her mother, the physical proof that she could take something broken and make it whole again. At 2 in the afternoon, Maya came home from school. She looked tired but composed, wearing one of Sarah's old band t-shirts and jeans streaked with fresh engine oil from her lunch period, which she spent in the auto shop. She'd been helping the shop teacher rebuild a Chevy small block, doing it for free because she loved the work. She saw me at the table and stopped. "I wasn't expecting you to be here," she said. "It's your birthday." "Right." She set her backpack down. "Look, if you're going to do the whole apology speech, let's just skip it. I told you I'll be fine. I've got my savings. I've got financial aid. I'll take out more loans if I have to." "Maya, sit down, please." She hesitated, then pulled out a chair and sat across from me. This close, I could see the details I'd been missing, the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly with fatigue, the brittleness that came from pushing too hard for too long. I slid the envelope across the table. "This is $46,300, I said. "It's everything I have." Everything I could scrape together, beg, borrow, or steal. It's not the full 50,000 I promised. I'm 4,000 short. Maya picked up the envelope, opened it, looked at the certified checks. Her expression was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay, you're 4,000 short." She put the envelope down. "I've got about 14,000 saved, so between us, we've got 60,000 total. That covers the first year fully, plus most of the second. I can work summers, take out reasonable loans for the rest. I'll graduate with some debt, but not crushing debt." She said it so matter-of-factly, like she'd already done the calculations, already planned for my failure and moved past it. "I'm sorry," I said. "I tried. I really did." "I know you tried." Maya's voice was tired, devoid of accusation. "I watched you try. I watched you work yourself half to death. I watched you sell your truck, take out loans you can't afford, skip meals because you thought I didn't notice. You tried. But I failed." "Yeah." She picked at a spot of oil on her jeans. "You failed at the promise, but you succeeded at showing up, which is more than you've done for most of the last 4 years." The words should have stung, but they felt like relief. An acknowledgement of failure that was also, somehow, a form of forgiveness. "I made that promise when I was drunk and stupid," I said. "I made it because I missed your mother, and I wanted to give you something, anything, that would make the grief hurt less. I never thought you'd actually get that car running. I underestimated you, the same way I underestimated your mother." "I know. And I'm sorry for that too, for doubting you, for not seeing what you were capable of, for treating your project like it was just a distraction instead of something real." Maya was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the February afternoon was cold and grey, the kind of day that made upstate New York feel like the end of the world. But inside the kitchen, with the afternoon light slanting through the windows, there was something that felt almost like warmth. "The car was never really about the money," Maya said finally. "I mean, the money matters. College costs money, and I'm not going to pretend I don't need it. But the real reason I spent all those months in the garage, learning about rotary engines and carburetor rebuilds and compression ratios, I was trying to understand her." "Your mother?" "Yeah. She loved that car. She spent hours out there, covered in grease, completely absorbed in solving problems. And I never got it when I was younger. I thought it was weird, the way she'd choose working on a car over watching TV or going out with friends. But then after she died, and you made that promise, and I started trying to actually do it, I got it. The car wasn't just a car, it was a puzzle, a challenge, a thing she could control when everything else felt chaotic." Maya's eyes were wet now, but her voice stayed steady. "Working on that engine, I felt close to her in a way I hadn't since the accident. Like I could understand what she was thinking when she chose this complicated, frustrating, ridiculous car to restore. She wasn't running away from us. She was finding herself. And I was doing the same thing." I reached across the table and took her hand. She didn't pull away. "Your mother would be so proud of you," I said. "Not just for fixing the car, for everything. For your grades, for your work ethic, for becoming this strong, capable person despite everything that's happened." "Would she be proud of you?" The question hit harder than she probably intended. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Probably not. I've made a lot of mistakes, been a lot of things your mother wouldn't have wanted me to be." "You've been grieving," Maya said. "We both have, just in different ways." She pulled her hand back, but gently, not as a rejection. She stood up and grabbed a water bottle from the fridge, drank half of it in one long pull. When she turned back to me, there was something different in her expression, not quite forgiveness, but maybe the beginning of it. "I'm still mad at you," she said, "for making a promise you couldn't keep, for checking out these last few years, for making me feel like I had to parent myself. That doesn't just go away because you worked hard for a few months. I understand. But I also get it now in a way I didn't before. How hard it is to keep going when the person you built your life around is just gone. How easy it is to just stop trying. She set the water bottle down. You stopped trying for a while, but then you started again. That counts for something. We stood there in the kitchen, and I felt the weight of 4 years of accumulated silence pressing between us. But there was also something else, a crack in the wall we'd built, a possibility of something better. "I want to make a new deal," I said. Maya raised an eyebrow. "I'm not sure I trust your deals anymore." "Fair, but hear me out." I pulled out a piece of paper I'd been working on for the last week, a plan I'd drawn up during sleepless nights. "I owe you $4,000. I'm going to pay it, but not all at once. I'm going to send you $500 a month, starting next month until it's paid off. That's 8 months. By the time your sophomore year starts, you'll have the full amount." "Dad, you can't afford—" "I can if I scale back. No more overtime, no more side jobs that are killing me, just my regular paycheck, budgeted carefully." I slid the paper across to her. "And in exchange, I want you to quit the overnight job. Keep the diner if you want, that's reasonable hours, but no more burning yourself out." Maya studied the budget I'd drawn up. It was tight, painfully tight, but it worked. I'd cut every non-essential expense, would be living on rice and beans and cheap coffee for the next 8 months. But it was sustainable. Barely. "What about your loan?" she asked. "The one you took out with the terrible interest rate." "I'll manage it. I made that choice. That's my responsibility." I met her eyes. "I'm asking you to let me finish this the right way. Not the fast way, not the dramatic way, just the steady, reliable way. Let me show you I can be the person who keeps his promises, even if it takes longer than we planned." Maya was quiet for a long time, reading through the budget, doing her own calculations. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, but I'm holding you to this. Every month, $500. You miss 1 payment. The deal's off, and I'm taking out more loans." "Deal." She held out her hand and we shook on it, formal and ridiculous and somehow exactly right. "I'm still working the diner," she said. "I like the work, and Linda's good to me. But I'll quit the gas station tonight. Raj will understand." "Thank you. Don't thank me, just keep your promise this time." She picked up the envelope with the $46,000 and held it for a moment, feeling its weight. "You know what the weirdest part is?" she said. "When I first got that car running, I was so angry at you. Because I'd done it. I'd accomplished this impossible thing, and you couldn't pay up. It felt like proof that you'd never really believed in me." Maya. "But watching you these last few months, seeing you try even when it was clearly killing you, I realized you did believe in me. You just didn't believe in yourself. You thought you had to be perfect, had to pull off some miracle, or you'd completely failed as a father." She set the envelope down and looked at me directly. "You don't have to be perfect, you just have to be present. That's all I've ever really needed." I felt something break open in my chest, something that had been locked tight since Sarah died. Tears came, unexpected and overwhelming, and I didn't try to stop them. Maya came around the table and hugged me, and we stood there in the kitchen crying together, 4 years of grief and anger and fear, finally finding a way out. When we finally pulled apart, the afternoon had shifted into early evening. Maya had to get ready for her last overnight shift at the gas station, had to turn in her notice to Raj. I had to figure out how to cook something more substantial than ramen for the first time in weeks. "Hey, Dad," Maya said, heading toward the stairs. "Yeah?" "The RX-7 needs an oil change, and I was thinking about replacing the spark plugs. Maybe upgrading the exhaust system. Would you want to help? I could show you how rotary engines work." It was an olive branch, an invitation back into her life. "I'd like that," I said. "I'd like that a lot." She smiled, a real smile, the first I'd seen from her in months, and headed upstairs. I stood in the kitchen listening to the sounds of the house, the old familiar creaks and settles, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of Maya moving around in her room. We weren't fixed, we weren't whole, but we were talking, and that was something. The next morning, I went to the warehouse and talked to Dale about dropping back to regular hours. He wasn't happy about it, but he didn't fight me. I cleaned out my work locker, said goodbye to the guys I'd been picking up extra shifts with, and drove home in my beat-up Honda, feeling lighter than I had in months. Maya was in the garage when I got there, changing the oil on the RX-7. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, my first in weeks, and walked out to watch her work. "Hand me that drain pan," she said, not looking up. I did. She positioned it under the oil pan, started loosening the bolt with practiced efficiency. "Mum used to talk to the car when she worked on it," Maya said. "Did you know that?" I didn't. Yeah. She'd have whole conversations, explaining what she was doing, apologizing when she couldn't figure something out. I thought it was crazy when I was little. Now I do it too. The oil started draining, thick and dark. Maya watched it flow, her hand steady. "What do you say to it?" I asked. "Mostly I tell it about my day, what happened at school, what I'm worried about, what I'm hoping for." She glanced up at me. "Sometimes I tell it about you, about how you're trying, even when it's hard." "What does the car say back?" She smiled. "Same thing Mom used to say. Keep going. You're closer than you think. Don't give up. Not." We worked together for the next hour, Maya teaching me the basics of rotary engine maintenance, me handing her tools and trying not to feel completely incompetent. The February sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the garage in amber light, and for the first time since Sarah died, our house felt like a home again. That night, we ordered pizza, a luxury I couldn't afford, but allowed myself anyway, and ate it at the kitchen table while Maya told me about the automotive engineering program at State, the classes she'd be taking, the professor she'd already emailed who specialized in rotary engines. "He's doing research on modern applications for Wankel engines," she said, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "Thinks they could make a comeback in hybrid systems because of their power-to-weight ratio. I told him about the RX-7, sent him pictures of the rebuild. He wants to meet when I get to campus." I listened to her talk about compression ratios and eccentric shafts and things I didn't fully understand, and I realized that this was what I'd been missing. Not just conversations, but seeing her as a person with her own dreams and passions and future, separate from my grief and my failures. "I'm proud of you," I said when she paused for breath. "I know I don't say it enough, but I am. You're going to do incredible things." Maya's expression softened. "Thanks, Dad. And I'm sorry for checking out, for making you grow up too fast, for all the ways I've failed you since your mom died. I know, and I'm sorry too for being so hard on you, for not seeing how much you were struggling." She picked at the pizza crust on her plate. "We've both been kind of a mess." "We have, but we're figuring it out." "Yeah, slowly." Over the next few months, we settled into a new rhythm. I worked my regular hours at the warehouse, came home at reasonable times, started cooking actual meals. Maya quit the gas station, kept her weekend shifts at the diner, spent her free time in the garage keeping the RX-7 in perfect condition. I sent her the first $500 payment in March, delivered it in an envelope at breakfast before she left for school. She took it without comment, but I saw the acknowledgement in her eyes, a promise kept, a debt being paid. April brought her prom, which she attended with a group of friends rather than a date, wearing a dress that had been Sarah's from the 80s, altered to fit her taller frame. May brought graduation, where she gave a speech as salutatorian about persistence and rebuilding and finding strength in unexpected places. I sat in the audience with Patricia and Eduardo, crying openly while Maya talked about her mother's car and the lessons it had taught her. In June, we took the RX-7 on a road trip, just the two of us, driving down the coast to visit State University's campus. The rotary engine hummed perfectly, eating up highway miles, the car performing exactly as Maya had rebuilt it to perform. We stopped at diners and roadside attractions, slept in cheap motels, talked about everything and nothing. One night in a diner in Delaware, eating mediocre pie and drinking burnt coffee, Maya asked me a question. "Do you think Mom would have liked who I've become?" I didn't have to think about the answer. She would have loved who you've become. You're everything she hoped for. What about you? Do you like who I've become? I'm amazed by who you've become. You took something that was broken and made it beautiful, and I'm not just talking about the car. Maya smiled, that same smile from the kitchen months ago, the one that meant we were going to be okay. By the time we reached campus in August, I'd made 4 more payments, $2,000 toward the debt I owed her. We moved her into her dorm, met her roommate, toured the engineering building where she'd be spending most of her time. The campus was beautiful, full of possibility, the kind of place where futures were made. When it was time to leave, we stood in the parking lot next to the RX-7. Maya had driven it down, would keep it on campus, a reminder of home and her mother and everything she'd overcome. "You've got $4,000 left to pay me," she said. 8 months of payments. I know. You'll have it by April. I trust you. She said it simply, but the words carried weight. Forgiveness earned, faith restored. I hugged her goodbye, held on maybe a little too long, then watched her drive away in Sarah's car toward her new life. The rotary engine's distinctive buzz faded into the distance, and I stood alone in the parking lot, feeling the strange mix of pride and loss that comes with watching your child leave. I drove home in my Honda, back to the empty house in Poughkeepsie, back to my life that was smaller now, but somehow more manageable. I worked my shifts at the warehouse, sent Maya her monthly payment, talked to her once a week on the phone, while she told me about her classes and her projects, and the professor who was letting her help with his rotary engine research. In November, on what would have been Sarah's 44th birthday, I visited her grave for the first time in 2 years. I brought flowers and sat on the cold ground, and I told her about Maya's success, about the promise I'd broken and then worked to fix, about the man I was trying to become. "I still owe her money," I said to the headstone. 4 more months of payments. But I'm going to make them, all of them. And maybe that's not the same as keeping the original promise, but it's something. It's showing up. It's being present. The wind moved through the bare trees, and I imagined it was Sarah's voice, telling me the same thing she used to tell the car. "Keep going. You're closer than you think. Don't give up." I made my last payment to Maya in April, 8 months after her 18th birthday, exactly as I'd promised. I drove down to campus and handed her the envelope personally, $500 that closed out the debt. We celebrated by taking the RX-7 out for a drive, pushing it hard on empty country roads, the rotary engine singing at high RPM, the car responsive and alive. Maya drove with confidence, one hand on the wheel, completely at ease with the machine she'd brought back from the dead. "I've been thinking," she said as we headed back toward campus. "When I graduate, I want to open my own shop, specializing in rotary engines, restoration work, maybe some performance builds. I've been saving, planning it out." "That sounds perfect for you. I'd want to call it Morrison Automotive, after Mom." She glanced at me. "If that's okay with you." She'd love that. I love that. We drove in comfortable silence, the kind that comes when you've been through hell together and come out the other side. The April sun was warm, the trees were starting to bud, and ahead of us, the road stretched out full of possibility. "Hey, Dad," Maya said. "Yeah? Thank you. For trying. For showing up even when it was hard. For proving that promises matter even when they're messy." Thank you for not giving up on me." She smiled, that beautiful smile that was all Sarah, and pressed down on the accelerator. The RX-7 responded immediately, rotary engine buzzing with power, and we flew down the road toward whatever came next, together.